All right. Welcome to the Progressive Update. This is a special edition regarding the hearing with Michael Cohen. There's a lot to cover. I'm going to try to do the Cliff Notes version of it to pack everything in a very short time that you're up on all the little things you might have missed in that coverage. The mainstream media has picked up on some of them, but there's a lot to go into. So whoever watched it, there was an interesting line of questioning by the new Congress people, uh, Kana and AOC in particular, and I will cover that a little bit later. So basically, what happened was a hearing at Congress where Republicans and Democrats were grilling Michael Cohen about his testimony regarding Donald Trump. And it seems like to have been split. The Republicans solely were attacking Michael Cohen about his character and tried to drive the point that he should not be believed because his he has lied in the past. And that pretty much was the only line of defense. They have not attempted to dispute any allegations against Trump. They didn't try to defend him. They didn't even ask Michael Cohen about details on his testimony. But they have repeatedly gone after him. So I will discuss that as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the different allegations, the main allegations that were made to different categories, ones that are claims that are just hearsay and more like character testimonies, others that are that may be criminal have criminal impact on Trump, and finally the ones that are criminal and impeachable, which is obviously the most important part. Those are the crimes that may actually cause Trump to be removed, depending on how things go. So I'm going to try and organize that for you. Also, I'm going to touch on things that were disputed by Michael Cohen, and that has significance as well. So, to answer the question of why we should believe Michael Cohen when he has lied in the past, he's lied to Congress, he's lied in other situations as well, he's lied to banks that he's tried to get loans from. He's done all kinds of things. But why should we believe him? Well, the answer is, well, we shouldn't blindly believe him. However, with that said, Michael Cohen knows that he's being sent to 3 years in prison, and that is a large discount of the many years that he would have had to serve otherwise, in most likelihood, if he was convicted. And this depends greatly on his cooperation with the prosecution, with Mueller, and his not lying. If he's caught in a lie at this stage, his plea deal would be canceled at the pleasure of the prosecution and the special counsel. So he has all the interest at this point to tell the truth, regardless of what his interest in the past was. And for that reason, I also attribute importance to the things that he has denied, not just to the things that he has implied about Trump and that are not so savory, but also the things that he's defended Trump on and ultimately denied regarding the collusion or his knowledge of collusion with the Russians. So basically, as I said, the Republicans were basically going after him repeatedly. It was a little bit childish. One of them said, "Liar, liar, pants on fire," which is like a 3-year-old kind of attack. And others, like Jordan, have tried to throw mud on the wall and see what sticks. They have done everything to attack him, from saying that it's the Clintons that were behind this and that he was being used by Democrats and by the attorney that was associated at one time with Clinton's. And the other aspects he was saying were that Cohen was attempting to cut himself a bargain by appeasing Democrats that were trying to go after Trump. And then finally, he also expressed another theory that Michael Cohen was jealous or envious. He was disappointed that he was not getting into the White House. He wasn't getting a job in the White House, and that's why he turned sour and is attacking Trump. So he's done everything in his power to try and basically depict him as a horrible human being, which he might have been. But if there's any reason to believe that he would be telling some of the truth, it would be now, when his plea bargain is dependent on it. In the past, he had strong motivation to lie because that aligned with his interest at that time. So basically, I think one of the Congress people that spoke yesterday on the Democratic side said something very interesting. He said the Republicans on the committee were not mad at Cohen for having lied. They were mad because he has stopped lying. And that may very well be the case. Another thing that strikes me and stroke other people is that if the Republicans claim that you can't turn a witness because they were awful people and they lied in the past and you can't trust them, then none of the mob trials could have been conducted because they depend on turned witnesses. So this whole claim is ludicrous in any legal terms. So, okay, so let's see what were the accusations that were made against Trump. And we'll start from the ones that are kind of hearsay, more like a character attack, neither here nor there. And I tend to believe those coming from Cohen because he really doesn't have anything to earn with that. These were not part of any plea. They are not legally actionable. Those are just things that add color or information about Trump. And really, like, there's no advantage to him to make those up. One of them was that, and the reason I'm saying it is because they make him look bad for having served Trump, knowing all of these things, and he's acknowledged that he's ashamed that he has overlooked these things for all this time in his pursuit of success. The first thing was his claim of racism. He said that Trump has previously told him that black people were too stupid to vote for him. He's also claimed that only blacks can live in these conditions when they went through a dilapidated Chicago neighborhood. And I think there was something else as well. And those paint not a nice picture of Trump in terms of racism. He also mentioned that Trump instructed him to threaten universities and high schools where he studied not to release his SAT scores and other scores to the press in the run for presidency. And that was actually corroborated by some institutions like Fordham that tweeted that confirmed he has indeed sent warning letter that threatened with a lawsuit if they released it, even though they by law would not release it. This is confidential stuff in any event. But it makes you wonder why, how bad are those grades that would be such a catastrophe for the campaign. Again, this is nothing that is actionable, but it does give a little information about Trump. Another was his the bone spurs issue, and that Trump has told him that he was not required to go to Vietnam because of a bone spur issue. But when Michael Cohen dug deeper, Trump told him that there was no surgery and there was no other information, and that he wasn't stupid to have gone to Vietnam. And it's very offensive, especially since Trump has been making remarks about war heroes and McCain, and himself has apparently just evaded service. No matter whether the war was controversial or not, that's objectionable compared to other people who had to go and had no choice in doing so. Also, Cohen regretted having had been asked to lie about Trump's affairs to the First Lady, to Melania. And he regretted it very much. He said that Melania was a nice person and she did not deserve that. And he felt very badly personally on that issue. A couple of other hearsay things were Michael Cohen testified that he overheard Roger Stone telling Trump that about the upcoming WikiLeaks dump of the DNC information, the DNC hack. If you remember, there was information that was leaked to the press regarding the DNC that made Hillary's campaign look very bad. And there's a question that's surrounding Roger Stone regarding whether he knew or did not know about it. He's bragged in the past that the WikiLeaks dump would happen, and later he claimed that that was just a guess and he didn't really know and he had no way of, it was just predicting it, which is very strange. But according to Michael Cohen, he actually told Trump about this ahead of time. And that response that he described from Trump was that he expressed joy about it. He said, wouldn't that be great? And the reason this is important is because you could make the point that just the awareness of this would constitute a crime if you have not reported it to the CIA and you knew about Russian meddling that was going on. So didn't even have to be provoking that or paying for it, but the mere knowledge that they were doing so and you were not alerting the CIA about this kind of behavior is problematic. That could come back to bite Trump. Another hearsay was the fact that Trump Jr. Supposedly came into the office one time during a Michael Cohen visit and stepped behind the desk to whisper something to Trump. And according to Michael Cohen, he overheard that it was about the upcoming meeting with the Russians, and that Trump acknowledged that. That is another peg in that that by itself, he doesn't have a recording, he can't prove it. So it's basically just a hearsay at this point, but it's nevertheless important to know. Now, the other category, like I said, is a list of main criminal claims that are criminal. However, they're not impeachable because the distinction is whether it's a high crime or not a high crime when it comes to impeachment. You can impeach on high crimes, and the meaning of that term is that it has to be something that either leads to an election or is done in office that is related to the post. Uh, Only in these cases could it be impeachable. A president cannot be impeached according to those technical rules if it's relating to some crime other than that. So these are crimes, and whether he will be indicted on it or not has to do more with the legal, constitutional legal decision of whether a sitting president can be indicted, and that has not yet completely been determined. There was a ruling during Nixon's time that was not the case, but that was only a partial ruling, and it's very possible that that might be ruled in the opposite direction, and that indictment would be a possibility for sitting presidents. So this is why it's so important. And the first thing that I'll touch on was the accusation that Trump has inflated or messed with the asset value of his properties. And so basically he inflated the value when it came to asking for loans, because that would give him a bigger borrowing rate, borrowing threshold, and he was deflating the value where it came to the property taxes and to insurance. And that's something that AOC has kind of laser focused on, and she's done a fantastic job at focusing on that. And I'll play this clip here.
Yeah, I want to ask a little bit about your conversation with my colleague from Missouri about asset inflation. To your knowledge, did the president ever provide inflated assets to an insurance company?
Yes.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
And where would the committee find more information on this? Do you think we need to review his financial statements and his tax returns in order to compare them?
Yes, and you'd find it at the Trump org.
Thank you very much. The last thing here, the Trump Golf Organization currently has a golf course in my home borough of the Bronx, Trump Links. I drive past it every day, going between the Bronx and Queens. In fact, the Washington Post reported on the Trump Links Bronx course in an article entitled, "Taxpayers Built This New York Golf Course and Trump Reaps the Rewards." That article is where many New Yorkers and people in the country learned that taxpayers spent $127 million to build Trump Links in a, quote, generous deal, allowing President Trump to keep almost every dollar that flows in on a golf course built with public funds. And this doesn't seem to be the only time the president has benefited at the expense of the public. Mr. Cohen, I want to ask you about your assertion that the president may have improperly devalued his assets to avoid paying taxes. According to an August 21st, 2016 report by the Washington Post, while the president claimed in financial disclosure forms that Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter, Florida, was worth more than $50 million, he had reported otherwise to local tax authorities that the course was worth, quote, no more than $5 million. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether this specific report is accurate?
It's identical to what he did at Trump National Golf Club at Briarcliff Manor.
Do you know, to your knowledge, was the president interested in reducing his local real estate bills, tax bills?
Yes.
And how did he do that?
What you do is you deflate the value of the asset, and then you put in a request to the tax department for a deduction.
Thank you. Now, in October 2018, the New York Times revealed that, quote, President Trump participated in dubious tax schemes during the 1990s, including instances of outright fraud that greatly increased the fortune he received from his parents. It further stated from Mr. Trump, quote, he also helped formulate a strategy to undervalue his parents' real estate holdings by hundreds of millions of dollars on tax returns, sharply reducing his tax bill when those properties were transferred to him and his siblings. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether that specific report is accurate?
I don't. I wasn't there in 1990s.
Who would know the answer to those questions?
Alan Weisselberg.
And would it help for the committee to obtain federal and state tax returns from the president and his company to address that discrepancy?
I believe so.
Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
So basically what that means is that if these allegations are right, and this is going to be relatively easy to corroborate, because let's not forget that the Southern District of New York is looking into these issues as we speak, and they have already spoken with Alan Weisselberg, who was involved in this issue. I'm sure they've spoken also with the other people that Cohen has mentioned in this regard. And so when you put a bunch of people and they know that they're in danger of being held accountable for these things, they very easily step into a collaborative mode. So counter corroboration is very likely. And I suspect that they already have that in the bag. Otherwise, they would have not let him even discuss these issues in front of the hearing. So basically, this means that if these allegations were correct, that there was insurance fraud conducted, which he could be held accountable for, he could be gone after by the insurance companies, and a tax fraud, which is also a federal law, and I mean state law for sure, that that he would have broken. Another issue was the allegation that he has received payments that were refunding him, Michael Cohen that is, were refunding him for the bribe amounts that he's paid up front for Stormy Daniels, the porn star that Trump has had sex with. So the problem with that, the reason why that is an issue, is because this is like a garden variety crime, as Ro Khanna has named it. And what it means is that it's basically cooking the books. If you're being given a sum of money and it's attributed to something else in the budget line, that is actual fraud. And so he can be held accountable just on that point alone. And since his son, Donald Jr. and Eric Jr. have signed on these payments, they're also complicit in this, and that is something that could be held against them. They could sit in jail just for that one point. And anything that implicates Junior is also very material, because let's say you cannot impeach Trump for a technicality, but if the sons are liable, it's very possible that Trump would have to make some sort of agreement, a deal that would save the sons from prosecution, but he may have to step down. So something to keep in mind.
According to the criminal charges against you, you sent monthly invoices containing false information to an individual identified as Executive 1. Weisselberg is Executive 1, correct?
Yes.
The criminal charge against you then states that Executive 1 forwarded your invoice to someone referred to as Executive 2. Presumably, Donald Trump Jr., who's signing this check, is executive too, correct?
I believe so.
As federal prosecutors laid out in their criminal charges, payments like this check resulted in numerous false statements in the books and records of the Trump Organization. And it's important for the American public to understand this. Nothing to do with collusion. This is financial fraud, garden variety financial fraud. It was disguised as a payment for legal services to you. But this was not a payment for legal services, was it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
It could give rise to serious state and federal criminal liability if a corporation is cooking its books. Based on your testimony today, Donald Trump Jr. and Alan Weisselberg directed this payment to you and approved this payment. Is that right?
Mr. Trump initially acknowledged the obligation, the debt. Myself and Alan Weisselberg went back to his office, and I was instructed by Alan at the time that they were going to do this over 12 installments. And what he decided to do then was to have me send an invoice, in which case they can have a check cut. And then, yes, the answer would be yes to your follow-up.
And Donald Trump Jr. obviously signed off on this.
Yes, well, it would either be Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and or Alan Weisselberg, but always Alan Weisselberg on the check.
And you think executive two is Donald Trump Jr.?
Yes.
They knew that this payment was false and illegal, correct?
I can't make that conclusion.
You told Representative Kelly that the president was aware of this scheme. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just want the American public to understand the explosive nature of your testimony in this document. Are you telling us, Mr. Cohen, that the president directed transactions in conspiracy with Alan Weisselberg and his son, Donald Trump Jr., as part of a criminal conspiracy of financial fraud? Is that your testimony today?
Yes.
And do you know if this criminal financial scheme that the president, Alan Weisselberg, and Donald Trump Jr. are involved in is being investigated by the Southern District of New York?
I'd rather not discuss that question because it could be part of an investigation that's currently ongoing.
But I just want the American public to understand that solely apart from Bob Mueller's investigation, there is garden variety financial fraud. And your allegation and the explosive smoking gun document suggests that the president, his son, and his CFO.
Okay, so now we get to the most explosive, most dangerous aspects for Trump. And those are the provable criminal aspects that may be impeachable. We may act on them to impeach the president because they relate to his election and to the reason he is in power right now. And one of them is an extension of the Stormy Daniels bribe story. So in relation to deflecting from the campaign, according to the evidence, Trump has instructed to pay her off and do a trap and kill on her story through other publications that were bought her story as if they were going to publicize it, but in fact they were just going to kill the deal as a gesture to Trump. And that is the aspects that are criminal in it, that revolve around that type of transaction, as well as the fact that he's broken campaign finance laws by paying off someone for the purpose of avoiding damage to his campaign without notifying and subsequently lying about it. That could come back after him in an impeachable form. The other impeachable aspect is the fact that he knowingly lied about the Moscow deal. He was going after a permit to build the highest tower in Europe, which was supposed to be in Moscow. He was getting this straight from the highest levels of Russian government. And that is something that would have most likely have affected his chances of winning if that came out when he was asked about it. Trump boldly lied about this and said there was no Moscow deal. And Michael Cohen testified that Trump made it very clear to him that he was supposed to lie about it as well. And he did so by not by instructing him to lie, but rather to look him in the eye and say there was no deal in Moscow, which obviously, to both of their knowledge, there was. So this is clearly an instruction to lie about it without actually having to use the instruction. So that is another impeachable offense there, according to our understanding right now. Now let's cover the things that were disputed by Michael Cohen, and that is just as important because there were questions that were kind of brushing on the collusion aspects, and Republicans kept harping on why they were not permitted to ask about that. The real reason is that Michael Cohen is really not the right person to ask about it, and he has said it himself. He had very little information about the collusion. He could speculate, which he did. He thinks they might have been, but he was not part of the campaign, and he was not brought in on these discussions with Russians or any of that. So he really was not very helpful in this regard. And I'm sure if he was, Michael Cohen would have received great plea bargains from Mueller. That was not the case yet, so I don't think that he touches much on that aspect. So that may have disappointed some who were hoping to get more information about possible conspiracy, in legal terms, between the Russians and the Trump campaign or Trump himself. The other thing that he's disputed was that news story that was going around that was also mentioned in the dossiers, and that is that Michael Cohen was in Prague to pay off Russians regarding this type of breach, data breach that they've conducted of the DNC and the Democratic source information. Again, I think that this is believable for the reason that he would have gotten into trouble had he lied about it. He would lose his plea bargain. He may have to serve the rest of his life for that. I would not have taken a chance about that. There's no reason why he would take a chance about that. So I find this just as plausible as I am regarding the things that are not in Trump's favor. And that means that, I don't know, we're going to find out more about what occurred in terms of the Russians from other sources. I'm sure this is not going to take too long. Hopefully, Mueller's report will be transparent and available to all to read. Okay, well, we've covered the entire thing in 30 minutes. We've made it. So hopefully you'll share it on social media with the hashtag progressive update. So also you can tweet on this and send me your comments or questions for future programs. See you later. Bye-bye.